Welcome to our Advent study for 2020. This study group is based on a series of articles that explore the theme of Advent from a number of perspectives. The first week, Why Advent, looks at the historical development of Advent as a period of preparation for Christmas and the birth of Jesus as the incarnation of the divine word. This week, we look at some ancient or patristic understandings of the seasons of Advent, Christmas and Epiphany, and briefly also look at one modern understanding of Advent as a season of looking forward to the fulfillment of God's promises through the lens or perspective of what God has already done for us in the birth of Jesus Christ. In the second week, we look at Advent as a framework for Christian spirituality focused on endings and new beginnings. The third week looks at some of the paradoxes or ambiguities for an Advent spirituality that's surrounded by the false or idolatrous spiritualities of consumerism and triumphalism. This week we'll be encouraged to get in touch with the Jewish roots of our Christian faith and with our own need for restoration. In the fourth week we look at incarnation, not just the incarnation of God's word and the birth of Jesus Christ, but more generally at the incarnation of God's word in the creation of the world, of which the coming to birth of Jesus Christ is understood by Eastern Orthodox Christians as the completion. A longer reading, which we will discuss in the final week, looks more closely at the Advent theology of Jürgen Moltmann as the basis for an understanding of Advent as the hope of the whole created order. It's my hope that this study can be accessed just as easily by those who do not have email or internet access as by those who do. For anyone who needs hard or paper copies, the readings for the week ahead can be collected at the face-to-face Saturday discussions. For those who do have internet access, you'll receive an email inviting you to join the virtual study desk Advent Study 2020 on my Moodle Theologue site. This site gives you access to all of the readings, a glossary of useful terms, links to video or text messages, and some questions to guide your reading. You can also communicate with me or with other students through the forum. Please let me know if you have any difficulties accessing this, and also be assured that you will receive copies of the readings and links via regular email. The reading this week by Cornelissen is a quick orientation to the season of Advent through the theology of Jürgen Moltmann, who we'll be looking at more closely in the final week. This is by way of answering the question, what are we doing in Advent? Are we looking back to the birth of Jesus 2,000 years ago, or is the waiting in the season of Advent to do with something that we're still expecting in the future? Moltmann suggests the deeper context of Advent is the expectation of the second coming of Christ, understood as the fulfillment of what God has already done in the birth of Jesus Christ at Bethlehem 2,000 years ago. What we're waiting for in the second coming is the eschaton, a Greek word which means the end, but which in the context of our Christian faith, Moltmann insists, is the beginning and the restoration of creation as God intends it to be. The longer reading this week by Kelly looks at the three related seasons of the church year, Advent, Christmas and Epiphany. Kelly traces the historical origins of each of these seasons. It might be surprising to learn that the date of Christmas and its status as an important Christian observation was not fully fixed until the 6th century. Kelly notes, however, that the date of the 25th of December for the birth of Christ met with general agreement as early as the 3rd century, because then it was felt that the incarnation, not the birth, but the conception of Jesus Christ, would have had to have been on the first day of spring as the season of new birth. The observance on the 6th of January, our modern date for Epiphany, of the revelation of the divinity of Christ and the world, was a much older festival that wrapped together reflection on Jesus' birth with his baptism, the coming of the Magi, and also his first recorded miracle, all of which announced his divine origins. The gradual emergence of Advent as a period of reflection and waiting for the feast of the Incarnation had its origins in the Jewish understanding that a feast should be preceded by a fast, and it was also modelled on Lent as the period of preparation for Easter. Kelly ends his paper with some reflections by patristic writers, which is to say writers between the 2nd and about the 8th century, on the meaning of the seasons of Advent, Christmas and Epiphany. Note, for example, that we get our modern emphasis on John the Baptist, who appears in 2 of the 4 weeks of our Advent readings from Pope Gregory the Great, who saw John the Baptist as an example of the moral preparation that the season of Advent requires. I hope you will enjoy this week's readings, and I look forward to speaking with most of you at our session on Saturday morning at 11 a.m.